Hey everybody, welcome to your free GMAT Prep Hour. It is December 9th, 2020. I am Reed Arnold. I will be your host tonight through the wonderful world of the GMAT. Hello to everyone here live and to anyone here watching the recording. Thanks for dropping by. Glad to help you tonight. Hope we can find some helpful tips for you to improve your GMAT score. A few other things to be aware of. There are other free options from Manhattan Prep that you can sign up for if you're looking for other free prep. You can take the first of our live class. Any first class is free. That is one of 9 courses, 11% of a course that you don't have to pay a single thing for. Check it out, see if you like our vibe, see if you like the teacher, what have you. Class 1 is honestly one of the most important classes. We talk about data sufficiency, we talk about some major strategies in data sufficiency, we talk about sentence correction and some major strategies in sentence correction, and we talk about how the test is scored and structured, and you're going to get all sorts of useful information no matter where you are in your prep. So there's really no reason not to do it. Again, totally free of charge. You can also sample our Interact course. That is our self-paced video course, really neat program. It has won several awards. Basic idea, when you're in the course, if you get a question right, the program will divert you to a harder question. If you get a question wrong, it'll go into the foundations and give you an easier question. Make sure you're building up those places where you're missing easier stuff, much like the test does. The test adapts to you, and so does our Interact class. So tonight, and for those of you watching a recording, whenever time you're watching, we are going to be talking about reading comprehension drills. Reading comprehension is a tricky thing on this test. It's a tricky thing to study. It's a tricky thing to teach. It is in many ways the stickiest of scores on the GMAT. It's in many ways the easiest and the hardest thing to improve. It's the easiest thing to improve with a little bit more time because there's practice reading, and going through reading comp tends to raise scores. But it's the hardest to increase quickly. And a lot of people, if you're studying on a 1 month, 2 month, even 3 month study plan, sometimes it's tough to find as many points in reading comp as you can find in other question types. That doesn't mean you can't find any. But it does tend to be a little bit stickier. And it's also notoriously difficult to teach. I think if you ask any standardized test prep teacher, they will tell you, not everyone, but a lot of people will tell you that reading comp is their least favorite subject to teach. They find it difficult. It's hard to instruct, and it's hard to give assignments for. It's hard to give drills for. So that's what I've kind of come up with. Through 6 or 7 years of tutoring, I've come up with some reading comp drills that I think help people dig into reading comp in ways that they might not otherwise. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. 4 or 5 reading comp drills you can do for GMAT prep. And this is outside of what we sometimes call game work. Okay, so I've given you a visual image here, the difference between game work and gym work. Game work is when you practice, or if you're taking the real test, play the game, okay? So this is Michael Thomas. He's a receiver for the New Orleans Saints. And over here on the left, Michael Thomas is jumping up in between 2 defenders to catch a ball, okay? That is the game. That is what his job is in the game. He is jumping high to catch a ball. Here is Michael Thomas in the gym. And here Michael Thomas is doing something that he would never do in the game, right? He's strapped up to a machine. He looks like he's doing some squats on one leg. That is a motion, a movement Michael Thomas will probably not do in the middle of a football game, but he does this so that when it comes time to think, or when it comes time, to jump and catch the ball, he doesn't think about it. His muscles work like they've trained, and he jumps and he catches the ball, right? And so what we're talking about tonight, I want to really, really emphasize, is gym work. Nothing we do here is how you play the game. Nothing you do here, or none of these drills, are how you actually do reading comp on the test. But what they are meant to be are muscle builders, such that when it comes time to take the test and when it comes time to actually play the game, you don't have to think as much. You're just stronger and better at jumping and catching the ball, metaphorically, of course. Now, you should also do game practice. I want to be clear. You should just set a clock, do a reading comp passage, answer 3 questions, take practice tests. All that stuff is, of course, hugely, hugely important and valuable. But tonight, what we're talking about are the untimed, more, not strategic, more, I can't think of the word, specific, I guess. It's like the tone builders, the little fibrous muscles that accumulate into a skill. And so that is what we're doing today, gym work for GMAT reading comp. Okay. First thing, common thing that is said about reading comprehension is that it is so subjective. This is said about verbal in general. And there is a sense that reading comp and critical reasoning especially feel more subjective than the math problems that the tests throw at you. But the fact is that they are as objective, almost always as objective as the quant questions. I can't say that I've never found a question that kind of makes me raise an eyebrow, but it's fewer than 10, and I've done this again for many years. So most questions I think are solid, fair, objective. There's one right answer, 4 wrong answers for clear reasons why. The reason it feels more subjective in reading comp is because unlike with math, there's usually only one path to get to the answer, to get from question to answer. There's only one correct line of thought. Whereas in math, there's actually often multiple lines of thought. You can build an equation, you can maybe pick your own numbers, you could plug in the answer choices. There's all sorts of strategies and lines of reasoning that can get you from question to answer. But in reading comp, there's really only one, and critical reasoning. And there's a lot of temptation to go off that one path. And so when you're studying, what we want to do is figure out, first off, what is the path and why is it the path? And then what does one need to do when doing a question to walk that path and not be strayed, not be tempted by these stray paths that lead to wrong answer choices. Okay. Now, the other difficult thing about reading comp is that we don't have much at our disposal. What I mean by that is that in quant, we have rules, we have formulas, we have equations, shapes, and geometry, and things that like exponent rules, right? Like things that we can memorize on a flashcard. And if we know the rule, first off, knowing the rule is almost never enough, right? That'll get you the first level questions, but the thing the test does is it takes these rules and makes them difficult. That's part of what you're studying for also. It's not just what the rule is, but how to use it, when to use it in harder situations where it's hard to see that that rule is applicable. That's really what it's testing. But in reading comp, we don't have those things. We don't have those formulas that we can put on a flashcard by and large. That doesn't mean you can't build flashcards for certain habits and strategies and indicators. But the thing about reading comp is that we only have the words that the passage has, the words that are in the passage, the words of the question and the answer choices, and then the thoughts in our own head. There is nothing else. And when you're reviewing reading comp, especially those questions you miss, and especially those ones you miss that you felt pretty good on, you have to go to these 3 places and figure out where things went wrong. How well did you interpret the words in the passage? How well did you interpret the words in the question and answer choices? How were the thoughts in your head about those words, right? Did you make good logical moves from the words in the passage to connect to the words in the answer choice? This is what verbal reasoning is, okay? And that is a thing to remember about reading comp in general, that reading is not thinking, and the GMAT is a thinking test. And so all of these drills that we're talking about tonight, they are meant to get us thinking hard about these 3 places in reading comp. Certain drills will emphasize one or over the others, or more, 2 of the 3, whatever it is. But these drills are meant to get us thinking more deeply about the words in the passage, the words in the question, and the thoughts that are going on in our head. Because if you're getting better at reading comp, you're getting better at these 3 things, and that's it. That's the only way to get better at reading comp. Okay, there's no formulas to memorize. You can read, you can read a lot so that you read a little bit faster, sure, but that's getting better at the words in the passage. That is one of these 3 things, and it requires a lot of self-brain surgery. Okay, when you're practicing and reviewing reading comp and critical reasoning questions, a lot of what we talk about today are going to apply to critical reasoning. You're basically doing kind of surgery on your own brain, for a kind of gross metaphor, okay, and examining your own thoughts. So the first drill that we're going to talk about today, I call reverse reading comp. This is one of my favorite drills. This is probably the one we're going to spend the most time on today. The idea is, without reading a passage, which is not how you do the test. On the test, you always read the passage first. But without reading a passage, go to the questions, read the questions, and then go through each answer choice. This is untimed, fully untimed. But for each answer choice, based on what is asked, what you do is you write down, and I'm going to emphasize this, write down as specifically as you can what the passage would need to say or be in order to justify choosing that answer choice. What needs to be in the passage for that to be the right answer to this question? And I put B here because if a question's like, what is the primary purpose of this passage? And it gives 5 answer choices. I don't know if I guess the passage could say its main point, but I'm all just like, what would the general thrust of the passage need to say in order to justify choosing each answer choice? Okay. As you do this, try, and it's not always possible to entirely do this, but try to avoid words in the answer choice itself. And try to be 5 times more specific than you think you need to be. Specificity of thought is hugely important in reading comp, and I find when I do drills like this that students are, to put it blunt, a little lazy. They come up with just a simple pithy thing that's basically the same answer choice reworded. I want you to drill and be really pinpoint specific as you can. Then after you do this, you read the passage and take as long as you want, just read the passage. Then you go back to not the question and not the answer choices. You go back to the things you wrote for each answer choice. And you say, okay, that one is in the passage. That thing is in the passage. There should only be one, right? If you did a good job, only one of the things you wrote for that question should be in the passage, because if 2 of them are there are 2 right answers to that question, and that is no good. So what we're thinking about here is we're really specifying on the questions themselves, what kind of things, what kind of reasoning needs to be there to justify choosing an answer choice without actually trying to do the reasoning from the passage. Okay, I want to try to kind of emphasize these 3 things as different skills that need to work together to get right answers. A lot of times the problem is that we let the words in the passage and the words in the question blend together in a way that messes up our thinking. And what we really want to do is understand the words in the passage on their own, understand the thoughts in the question on their own, do good reasoning to link the ones that need to be linked, but we keep them kind of separate. So everyone take a minute or so to read through this question and these 5 answer choices, and we'll do an example of this together before I kind of send you off and throw you to the wolves on this reverse reading comp exercise. All right, so I'm going to do the first 2 for you all and kind of explain what I'm thinking and doing, and then I'll send you all and see if you can fill in the last 3 on your own. Okay, so the question asks, the passage suggests that if the movement of capital in the world were restricted, which of the following would be likely? So I'm thinking about when capital in the world is restricted, and I might not even understand what that means. That doesn't really matter in a reading comp passage. You don't need to know outside knowledge, but if capital in the world is restricted, which of the following would be likely? And so I kind of have a sense that, first off, this is an inference question. And so I know inference questions, there are 2 major kinds of inference questions, the flip and the syllogism, and I'll specify what those are here shortly. But I think about, okay, we're wondering about when the capital is restricted. That also means I might want to know what happens when capital in the world moves freely, because when it's restricted, it would be the opposite of that, okay? So to justify choosing answer choice A, which says advanced technology could move more quickly from developed countries to developing countries, well, this is supposed to be when capital is restricted. So when capital is restricted, I would need to say that technology moves quickly into developing countries, meaning it doesn't take much time. It doesn't take as long for technology to flow into developing countries. And again, you can keep writing. You can write this as many ways as you can think of. That's fine. Again, try to be more specific than you think you need to. Well, the opposite of that is when capital moves freely, technology does not move quickly or moves slowly from developed countries into developing countries. The passage needs to say that it takes more time for technology to flow into developing countries. Okay? If the passage doesn't say that, this answer is wrong. That's what it would require for this answer to be the right answer of this choice, either one of these things. Either that technology moves quickly when capital is restricted, or technology moves slowly because capital moves freely. I don't know why that would be. I just know that's what the answer would need to say. Okay, so this is answer choice A. For answer choice B, developed countries would compete more effectively for jobs with developing countries when capital is restricted. Okay, so when capital is restricted, developed countries do not lose jobs. I'm putting that's kind of a casual way to say it. When capital is restricted. And the mirror image of that is, okay, developed countries do lose jobs when capital moves freely. Or jobs flow from developed countries into developing countries. Or jobs that would be held in developed countries are instead held in developing countries. Okay. That is what I would need to say in order to justify choosing answer choice B for this question. All right. So I'm going to let you all do C, D, and E on your own. I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to think about this and fill in your own. What would need to be true? And you can, if you want to use this T-chart, you can. What would need to be true to justify choosing C, D, and E? Again, try not to just rewrite the answer. Try not to just say the same words as the answer says. Try to think about both situations, the flip and the original and the flip. Kind of work through the different ways they could give the information that would justify choosing that choice. Go ahead if you have your own version for C, D, and E, just type it in the chat. Let's see what kind of answers we're getting out there. All right, gang, so here is kind of what I've got for these answer choices. I'm cutting it for time. I was going a little long and had to kind of start writing faster and shorter than I intended. But basically, this is what needs to be true to justify choosing C, D, or E. If I'm going to choose C, that a country's average wage could increase without significantly increasing the sophistication of its technology or the value of its currency, that's a mouthful, right? To answer this question, like, what does that even mean? Well, it means that when capital is restricted, the wages can increase without the technology getting better or the value of its currency increasing. So we can increase wages without getting better technology or without increasing our currency. Or you could also say that a wage only gets better when technology improves and the value of the currency increases. They have to come together. That's what answer choice C implies. And if I'm going to choose C, the passage needs to say, when capital moves freely, a wage will improve only if also technology is improving or the value of the currency is increasing. Okay. To choose D, if I'm going to choose D, when capital is restricted, productivity increases, but the currency does not have to increase. Which means if capital is moving freely, the passage would say that productivity increases with the value of its currency. Productivity can only go up if the value of the currency is also going up. So to choose D, that's what I need. E, to say that workers could obtain higher wages by increasing their productivity when capital is restricted. So workers get higher wages by upping productivity. That means when capital is free, workers struggle to get higher wages even when they increase their productivity. They don't really see a wage increase if capital moves freely. That's what the passage needs to say in order to choose this answer choice. Okay. So, it's already 8:30. I was going to do this with 2 more questions, but time just moves so dang quickly here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one. If we have time, well, I guess we go back to the other 2 if I read the passage. That's okay. Let's just take a look at this passage here. I'll move things as needed. Go ahead and read the passage and choose which one of these boxes is in the passage to justify choosing it. When you think you have an answer, go ahead and say it in the chat. And also say what part of the passage you think matches something we have on the right there. Okay, so the one that I would choose would be D. Okay. I have a question. Have we reviewed quant? Bennett, I'm not sure exactly what you mean tonight. No, tonight we're doing just reading quant. We do have many free GMAT prep hours that are quant focused. If you check the catalog, you'll find many, many quant focused free GMAT prep hours, and we'll be doing more in the future for sure. So what the passage says that it's harder when capital moves freely. It is harder for countries to keep their currencies undervalued. And we're told if wages are not allowed to rise, the value of the currency will appreciate. Okay, so that means when capital moves freely, the currency value goes up. But if capital is restricted, the currency value does not necessarily go up. Now it does say that to the workers, if it goes up, the currency inflation is identical to the wage increasing, but it does imply that countries have tried to keep their wages down, the number down, but that's hard to do when capital moves freely. And so when that happens, productivity goes up and wages go up. Okay, that is the one that best matches. If you are watching this down the road, and I kind of wish I'd done this before, that would have been the better thing to do. You can screenshot this and use this as a other drill for this passage. You can do this for these, like go through each answer choice, specify what needs to be said for these, to choose these answer choices. And here are kind of my versions of them. Again, you can pause and read what the answer choice says, and then read what would justify choosing that answer choice, and understand why those things happen, and figure out what in the passage matches what would need to be true to justify choosing that answer choice. Okay. I would have done this drill all night if I could, but I did promise multiple drills. So we're going to talk about some other things you can do to improve reading comp. That's a more question-focused drill, right? Really focus on what the question asks and what the answers say, and to really justify choosing this. This is a more passage-focused drill, the 4th grade rewrite. Very simple exercise, very simple idea. Read a passage, untimed, as many times as you want. Your goal is to rewrite, and again, I emphasize rewrite the passage. Actually put pen to paper or fingers to keyboards and write the passage out. But you're writing it so that a 4th grader can understand it. Okay. Now this might mean, and this is important, it might mean rearranging the order in which the information is provided. It might mean splitting up ideas that are in one sentence and putting them in several sentences to really lay out the logic clean and clear and plainly. It might mean taking out details that are too specific, that are just kind of distracting. I don't need those for a 4th grader to understand the point. And it might mean writing out some things that are implied, but not actually stated. This is the GMAT's favorite thing. That is what inferences are. And so this is a good chance to recognize, well, if I was writing for a 4th grader, I would make this thought that's clearly there explicit so that the 4th grader understands what's going on without having to kind of generate the thought themselves. The GMAT is testing whether you can generate that thought yourself. So for a 4th grader, let's hand it to them. This does not mean when you do the 4th grade rewrite, you don't just rewrite every sentence and you don't do it sentence by sentence. Do not start rewriting until you've read the passage at least once. That's a rule. And you don't just rewrite every sentence and just kind of rearrange some words or change words for synonyms. That's not the idea. And you're also not trying to capture every detail. Okay, so I'm going to give you here, 5-6 minutes to, and you might not finish this, that's okay. The point of today is mostly to start the drills and just know that the drills exist. Maybe 5-6 minutes to read this passage and start a fourth grade rewrite, and then I'll show you the fourth grade rewrite I did earlier, just to give you a sense of what it might look like. Okay. All right, gang, that's about 6 minutes. Now, if you're watching the recording, please feel free to pause and continue working. I would not expect you to actually finish the 6th grade rewrite in this time. And so those of you that are here live, it's okay if you haven't finished. I just want you to get started on this and get a sense of what the drill might look like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put up the passage I came up with, the 6th grade rewrite I came up with earlier. And I want you to read it, and I want you to, I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes here, and I want you to read it, and I want you to go back to the passages written and try to find where why that's the version that I came up with. Your version doesn't have to be exactly the same. There's no objective right way to this, but try to see where I got my rewrites from the passage itself and where that bridge is happening, okay? Where the complicated crud of this science passage becomes something that a 4th grader probably, hopefully, could understand. So I'm going to call attention to just a few moments in my 4th grade rewrite here, just because I think they're indicative of the kind of hand-holding you would want to do for a 4th grader, where you explicitly lay out what's not explicitly laid out in the passage, right? So there's this moment here. The type of rock did not explain the surprisingly low temperatures. That's never explicitly said. It just says that, why is it not as hot as we expected? Well, they thought maybe it'd be the type of rock because the clay doesn't heat up as much as other types of rock, and we know that there's clay down there. But then this other scientist found out that clay actually would be hot under the pressure that these rocks would be under. It would actually be as hot as the other kinds of rocks. And so that actually isn't the explanation for why these rocks weren't as hot as expected. And so it doesn't actually ever explicitly say that, but if we can tie that together, if we can understand what the purpose of this chunk of text is doing, right? It's talking about Byerly's experiments with clay and pressure and heat. Well, why are we talking about that? Because the point is that the type of rock turns out not to be the explanation. Now, it doesn't ever say that, but for a 4th grader, we would just let them know. We would just say that actually this thing we thought might be the explanation, turns out it's not the explanation. The GMAT, and it's tricky, but the GMAT doesn't say it explicitly. It hopes that from context and inferences, you realize that that's what's going on. Similar thing here. It doesn't actually say that the water between the rocks might explain the low temperature, but that is what we're mentioning it for. It turns out the type of rock doesn't explain it. So now they're wondering if maybe there's water down there that's keeping the rocks apart. Why are we wondering that? Because it's another possible explanation for why there are low temperatures here. Okay, So you really handhold your way through the passage. And notice I didn't just rewrite things. I didn't rewrite every sentence, and I didn't say everything in the same order. And I synthesized a lot and summarized a lot. The point is not to get every single thought there, and it's not to just rewrite the little sentence one by one. It's to take thoughts and organize them in a clear, straightforward way for a fourth grader to follow. This has been shown in studies to actually, this exercise has been shown to increase standardized test scores in standardized tests, comp drills. Okay, so this is a good one, especially if you struggle with main ideas. If you struggle with getting the main idea of a passage, this kind of exercise can help with that. Now, the other thing I've been meaning, I should have mentioned this a long time ago, excuse me, reading comp is really, it helps to have a partner. It really helps to have a partner to bounce ideas off of, so you can both do a drill like this and look at each other's work and critique and help each other realize, like, well, I don't think you quite captured this thought. I think you misinterpreted what this chunk says or means, and you can do the same for them, and you can help each other get to a point where it's like, okay, now we know what the thoughts in the passage are, and we know how they connect with each other. So I do think that team drills in reading comp can be very, very helpful. Okay, so that's the fourth grade rewrite. The next exercise I want to discuss is inference generation. Okay, another drill, untimed, totally untimed. Read and reread and reread and reread a passage as many times as you want. And the goal is to write down any inferences you think you can draw from the passage. Any inferences you can draw. The goal here is quantity, not quality, which is not usually what I say about GMAT study. But in this drill, the goal is just to milk the text for all the thoughts that are there. If you can draw the inference, write it down, okay? There are two kinds of inferences to look out for. I mentioned earlier that there are two kinds of inferences. The logical flip. So the logical flip is something like the second Transformers movie is my favorite Transformers movie. What you can infer from that, without me actually saying, is that I like the third Transformers movie less than the second. Okay, that's just flipping what is here into something that must be true. Okay, a synthesis inference is something where a passage will say, like, all flick-flacks are granulators, blah, 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 blah. The largest kind of flick-flack, the Bunsen burner, was invented, blah, 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 whatever. Well, what can I infer there? Well, I was told that all flick-flacks are granulators, and then I'm told that the Bunsen burner is the largest kind of flick-flack. So I can infer from that Bunsen burners are granulators. I made up gibberish, obviously. And so what you're doing is you're taking two pieces of information and synthesizing them into something that's not stated. So earlier we were doing the reverse reading comp, and we had the question about restricting capital flow. That had a synthesis. We had to go from the bottom, which talked about how it's hard to do something when capital now moves freely. We then had to think, okay, well, what happens when capital doesn't move freely? That's the logical flip. And then we had to synthesize it with what happens to a country's wages when productivity goes up. So it was actually both at once. It was a synthesis and a flip. That's always fun. That's how you know that question's hard. But you're looking to do these as often as you can. And it doesn't matter how obvious it is, doesn't matter how simple you think the inference is. If you know it's true based on logic and what the passage says, write it down. Okay. Now I'm going to give you here 5 minutes to do this with a passage, maybe 6. When I was doing this earlier, I did it for 15, and I didn't even really finish. I just had to stop because it was getting crazy. So I'll show you some of the inferences I found, but the idea is to really, really spend time doing this, really dig into the text, and again, be specific with the thoughts. And when you think you found them all, when you think I'm done, I can't possibly find another inference to make, set a clock for 5 minutes and find more. Keep going, okay? Really practice finding as many things in a text as possible. This is a drill more focused on the details, whereas the last one was more focused on finding main ideas. This one is more focused on the details. And again, not how you read on the actual test. You would go crazy if you were trying to do this on the actual test. But the idea is that the practice you do here, making inferences, will help you notice them easier on the test. Maybe things will pop out a little bit easier on the test. And when an inference question pops up, you'll be able to do it more easily on the test. Okay, so this is, again, a gym work exercise. So I'm going to pull up a passage here, give you 5-6 minutes. Just write down as many true inferences as you can based on what is written in this passage here. All the passages we're using today, by the way, are from official practice tests, which means they are official GMAT questions. There was probably a moment when you were doing this where you kind of wondered, am I drawing an inference or am I just copying a detail? And my honest advice for that moment is don't even worry about it. Just write down the thing and keep working. If it's a detail instead of an inference, okay, that's fine. Then you wrote down a detail. But the goal here again is quantity and not quality. You're just trying to extract truth from the passage itself. I find this exercise, again, I mentioned this earlier, but it's a very helpful thing to do with a partner. To do this with the same passage, to write down as many inferences as you can. Again, that was 5-6 minutes, not even 6. I spent 15 doing this earlier and came up with 12 inferences. You can do this for 20 minutes a passage if you want, and write down as many things as you can, and then swap with each other. Tell each other what inferences you drew, and see if you can figure out, A, if it's a good inference. Well, first off, A, where did they get that inference from in the text? And B, is that logical? Is that a fair inference? Did they draw a correct inference, or did they twist or misinterpret something? Again, working with a partner, you can bounce ideas off each other, argue what you think the text means, and until you come to an agreement. Okay, because again, the only 3 things you got are the text, the words in the text, the words in the questions, and your thoughts. And you have to wrestle with those 3 things. So here are 8 inferences that I drew here. Just go ahead and read through and see if you can pinpoint where in the passage I got these things. Where did I read them? And maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. If I did, let me know. I don't think I did, but that's kind of the joy of reading comp, is we get to figure that out. I shouldn't have used this word. Let's not say imitative, because that's from the passage. Let's say is not like mirroring. Let's replace that word with mirroring. So there's some places to look. So the author is not convinced by everything in David Allen's study. How do I know that? Well, in the first sentence, it's convincing up to a point. Well, that means there's a point where it stops being convincing. So I just know that this author is not fully convinced by David Allen's work. He studied fewer than 6 communities in Massachusetts. This seems obvious, right? Because it says he studied 5 communities. But the rule is, if you can come up with an inference, come up with an inference. If something has to be true, say what it is. If what's in the passage is true, this has to be true. So I said that he studied fewer than 6 because he studied 5. Dull but obvious, or dull but true. He did not focus on the big macrocosmic stuff because he was on the detailed microcosmic stuff. That needs to be true. The author thinks that, this is number 5, the diversity of institutions in New England is not mirroring. I wanted to take out a word that was the exact word in the passage, because again, the idea is not to use words in the passage. The author thinks the diversity of institutions in New England is not mirroring the differences in the mother country of England. That is, the differences in institutions in New England were a different kind of different than the differences in, it's a little typo there, the differences in institutions in England. Okay, where do I get that? Because the author says that David Allen oversteps. The author thinks he's wrong when David Allen says the extent to which the diversity in institutions is imitative of differences in the mother country, right? So there are differences in mother country institutions, and there are differences here, and oh, that's imitating each other. The New England one imitates the one in England. And the author says, I don't think so. I think that there's actually a difference in the kind of differences that David Allen is overlooking here. Okay, and then the author mentions all these things: population density, mortality and infectious diseases, the membership in a church, certain class structures, because it talks about squires being in charge of a town. So there's like this class structure that's there in England that's not there in New England. And he says that these differences affected the institutions that popped up in the two places. It's not a direct imitation. There are differences between countries that affects how these institutions popped up. Okay, and so you just go beat by beat through the different inferences you drew, and spar with each other. Say where you think you found a good one. Say where you think maybe there's a little mistake there. Something's not quite right. Not everyone in New England could be a member of a church because it says that membership was restricted to the elect in New England. So I know that not everyone's a member of a church. If you're at home and you want to look at the other 4 here, pause on the screen. Okay, but you go through and again just see if my inferences are justified. Okay, so we have about 4 minutes left. So I'm going to kind of rush through the last 2. And we might not actually have time to do it. In fact, we probably won't. I'm just going to tell you what they basically are. So the idea of an out of order read, okay? You can do it with you or a friend. Basically what you're going to do, or what your friend is going to do, is take the passage as written. And if you Google search any passage, you can find it on GMAT Club. And you or they is going to break the passage. If you're doing it, don't read it first. You're going to break the passage into 4 to 6 chunks of text. Okay, and then what you're going to do is randomize the order in which you read the chunks and make them about equally sized chunks of text. Okay, and randomize the order in which you read the chunks and read them in that order. Okay, and give yourself, I guess maybe use a clock on this one, but don't expect to read it as fast as you would otherwise, because you're reading out of order. It's going to be chaotic. If your friend does this, or I guess you could do this yourself, you can copy paste the chunks in a random order like I did here. Okay, and then you read the chunks in the order you copy pasted them after you've randomized it, and maybe you do this and then you walk away for a while and come back, so because I don't remember what order this is in, and you just read the chunks out of order. Okay, so at the time minorities constituted 17% of the nation's population, but only 4% of the nation's self-employed. This ownership gap was held to be the result of past discrimination. Increasing the number of minority-owned firms was seen as a way to remedy this problem. In this context, providing funding to minority entrepreneurs in middle and high income brackets seems justified. And so you read each chunk, and again, you take notes, you write out what you think that chunk of text is doing in your own words. Okay, so here we're talking about, it looks like we're talking about how minorities were a bigger portion of the population than they were of business owners. And it looks like there was, they were providing funding in order to fix that problem, trying to close the gap. Okay, and so I see what this is doing. It's talking about using funding to get minority-owned businesses up to the rate that they should be if it was proportional. Okay, and so that's the purpose of this chunk of text. And I do that for every chunk of text. And as I do it, I start to try to piece together the order of the passage and what the passage is actually about. And again, not how you read on the test, but what this is really emphasizing is that language is in a passage, you want to think of it as a collection of thoughts. Language is a tool with which we convey thoughts and ideas and emotions, but the GMAT's not particularly interested in that. And it's these thoughts and ideas that we want to find, and we want to understand how those thoughts and ideas logically fit together. And so what I kind of treat this as, it's like a jigsaw puzzle that we've dumped out of order, and we're now putting the jigsaw back in as you read and specify the meaning, you're putting the jigsaw pieces back in order. The other way you can do this is to cover the passage in 4 chunks, and then reveal one chunk at a time. And this way you know where the chunk is supposed to be in the passage, but you cannot see the other chunks. And you just work through and you randomize the order and uncover the order that you're reading as you're reading, and try to piece together what the logical connection must be with these chunks of text. And this is meant to get you in the mindset that when you're reading, you are constructing a logical map. You're not reading top to bottom, left to right. It's more active than that. It's easier to piece the logic together when you're reading in order, of course. That's why when you read out of order, it's making you work harder to do it, but that kind of thing is what you should do when you're actually reading the passage in the order that it's written. is you're getting ideas and seeing how they logically fit. Okay. Another exercise you can do, and I was going to do it with the same passage, was question creation. Simple idea. With a passage or even an article from a newspaper, try to get in the head of the test maker. And again, if you have a partner, you can swap questions. It's a good one to do with a partner. You read a passage, you make a GMAT-like question for it, and you come up with a right answer and some wrong answers. And you try to make some tempting wrong answers. See if you can understand what moments in a passage can tempt someone to think something differently or choose something incorrectly. Okay, so that's a good drill. Other drills you can do, I'll wrap this up here. Pictionary, simple game. You draw in a series of drawings or in a single drawing, capture the main points of a passage using as few words as possible. Again, it's good to do with a friend because you can each do a passage, swap, try to guess what each other's pictures, what story is they're trying to say. You'll never be perfect, but if you get your partner to guess pretty closely what the passage says, you've done well capturing the idea. And again, that's about taking what's in the passage and making it thoughts, making it a cohesive thought that you can use. Main idea knockout. Okay, the idea here is similar to going to the questions first like we did before, but instead just go to primary purpose or main idea questions before reading the passage. And as you read, your goal is to start eliminating answer choices that are not the main idea until you're left with one, just to get you thinking as you read about the big idea stuff. Probability, I don't know, I don't have a better name for this. A probability gauge, again, you go to the questions first, and you put probabilities next to the answer choices based on how likely you think those answer choices are the answer. Or if you, instead of like numbers, you can say, pick one to be, this is most likely the answer, two that are somewhat likely, and two that you think are unlikely to be correct. And that's just to get you thinking again about the test, about how what question is asked, what the answers say, based on your knowledge of either the subject or really just of the test, like which one feels like a GMAT answer that is correct and which one feels like that's ridiculous. There's no way that's the answer that the passage is going to say. Then you read the passage and you answer the question and you see how well you did. Okay, that's the basic idea. So, man, that was it. There's never enough time for everything you want to do. But we do have other things available to you. We will have more of these every 2 weeks. We will be doing a free GMAT prep hour. So come on back. If you want to come to one of our courses, check out this link, see what we got. Again, the first one is totally free. I'm going to stick around now to answer any questions you all have in the chat about reading comp or about anything else. Those of you that are watching the recording, best of luck in your studies. Hope to see you next time. Be well, be safe, be good, and happy studying. All right, gang. Let me see if there it is. Have a good one.